Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second shelf. Um, we passed a half a year mark in 2019, and so if you're following BookTube, you've seen the mid-year freakout book tag making the rounds. And Russell over at Ink and Paper Blog did the tag, and he kindly tagged me. And I want to do the tag, but I also want to do my, tops and flops, looking at the first half of the year. So I did a sort of a combination of both, not answering every question, but, you know, just roll with it. And I'm sure Russell will forgive me. The first question in the tag is one I want to answer, and that's the best book you've read so far. And I split this one in two: the best novel I read so far, and the best nonfiction book I read so far. Oh, and before I get into the best novel, there's one disclaimer because there are books I read that might have made one list or the other, but I can't talk about them. And those are the books that are in the BooktubePrize, the semifinals, 6 books. And I can't talk about them until all the judges handed in their ranking, and the deadline is the end of July. So this list that you will see or hear, or both probably, is not quite the entire a reflection of my entire reading of the first half of 2016. But anyway, for the best novel, I picked this one, The Illumination of Ursula Flight by Anna Marie Crowhurst. I read this as a buddy read with Doris over at All the Books, and we both really loved it. This book also qualifies for some of the other questions in the mid-year freakout tag: the best debut, because it's a debut novel. My favorite character, because Ursula Flight, the protagonist, is definitely my favorite character. The most beautiful book I bought, because I really love this cover. And also a book that made you happy, because it was such a delight. It's historical fiction. The book is set between 1664 and then until 20 years later, almost 20 years later. And we follow our main character, Ursula, from her birth in 1664, just after Cromwell died. During the reign of Charles II, the Restoration era, and she's born into a wealthy family, and she's quite well educated. Her father teaches her Greek and Latin, and they, watch the stars, and she learns mathematics. But then when she is 15, she is, as things go, married off to a nobleman. And the marriage is really unhappy. The husband is a prick. And then we follow her coming of age, coming into independence. The book is partly written in the first person point of view, but we also have diary entries. Ursula writes plays because that's what she really wants to do, be a playwright. So we have very short plays also as chapters in which she talks about things that happened to her in a play form. The book is funny, witty, intelligent. It also touches upon things that you don't often see in historical fiction, at least I think. A young woman's sexuality, getting her first period, giving birth to her first child. So it explores a woman's life in the late 17th century and her coming into independence in a really beautiful, delightful way. So this book made the top of quite a few prompts of the mid-year freakout tag. Then on to the best nonfiction book, and you might not be surprised that it's a memoir, because I read quite some memoirs in the first half of this year, and I love reading memoirs, and it was a tough choice because most of them I really like, but I picked, maybe not entirely objectively, Anne Summers' Unfettered and Alive, which was published at the beginning of the year. And I know Anne Summers. We served on the board of Greenpeace together. She as a chairwoman of Greenpeace International, and I was the chairwoman of Greenpeace Holland. So, yeah, well, but I read it as a buddy read with Jacqueline over at 6 Minutes for Me. And Anne Summers is Australian originally. She now lives in New York. And Jacqueline was interested because of the Aussie background of Anne. So we read it together, and Jacqueline also really liked it. So I'm comfortable not only putting this book as the best nonfiction book here, but also recommending it to you. It follows Anne Summers' life from her 30s to almost up to the present. She is now in her 70s. She started off as a journalist. She worked for the government as an advisor on gender equality issues, and then, like I already mentioned, she was on the board of Greenpeace as a chairman. Here, look at me as a chairwoman. As she moved to New York, she ran Gloria Steinem's magazine M for a while, which was not such a success. So Anne Summers did quite a lot of stuff in her life, and I thought the way she talks about her life is really engaging, really intelligent. I learned a lot about Australian politics when Anne was, advisor of the government there. I learned a lot about the feminist movement, about Gloria Steinem. I mean, I knew that the two of them clashed, which I can see because I know Anne, and Gloria Steinem is not the easiest person to work for or work with, I would say. But anyway, and it also really, I could also really relate to the book personally because Anne Summers made quite some career changes, surprising career changes, even later in life. And if you're following me for any length of time, you probably know that I worked as a lawyer for quite a long time. And when I turned 50, I decided to quit law and become a full-time writer. Still have to earn money now with jobs I do have, but the career switches when you are in the second half of your life is not something that a lot of people do, and I really loved the way that Anne Summers was always looking, for a new challenge, something that she would be enthusiastic to do, even if it's in her 60s. I think her last change was moving to New York when she was in her end of her 60s, beginning of her 70s. So if you're interested in memoirs, in a person who really had a wonderful life experience that she talks about, then I can certainly recommend this book wholeheartedly. Another prompt that overlaps from the Midyear Freakout tag and my normal tops and flops is the book that surprised you the most, or in this case, me, which was also quite a tough choice because each month there was at least one book that surprised me. But for the whole first half of the year, I picked another Australian author. The light is changing all the time because we have sun and then we have clouds, and I'm sorry about that. Anyway, I picked another Australian author, and that was Jane Rawson from The Wreck. The book surprised me. It's historical fiction set in 1859 and then plus years, and it's based on a real event, and that is a shipwreck that happened. A steamer, crashed, and most people were killed. There were only one or two survivors, and one of them was George Hill, who happened to be the author's great-great-great-great-grandfather. So we follow the story of George Hill, but he is not the only one who is stranded on that rock and then rescued. There is also an alien being from another planet, somehow a bit of a mystery figure in the book, being able to change appearance, taking on human or other human form, but also other life forms. And we switch perspective between George trying to deal with the aftermath of his experience, but also with the fact that he encountered this alien being, which sort of wiggles himself into George's life. I was surprised because this way of sort of magical realism thing is normally not my thing. So the book really surprised me that I loved it so much. And it also qualifies for another prompt that is not in my regular tops and flops, but in the mid-year freakout tag, and that's the saddest book. It says books that make you cry. I don't cry when I read, but it gives the alternative prompt, the saddest book you read. And even though the story has a sort of a happy ending, I really felt for this alien being stranded all alone on the earth, trying to find a new home. I thought that was heartbreaking. So From the Wreck is the book that surprised me, and also it's one of the saddest books. And then on to the flops. For this video, my mid-year tops and flops, I will only feature one. The prompt overlapping again with the mid-year freakout tag, and that is the biggest disappointment. If you're following the monthly tops and flops, you saw that I had quite some books that irked me or disappointed me. But looking back, I think the disappointment is always bigger if your expectation is high, and especially if you read a book that is universally loved, almost, and then you pick it up and you just hate it. And that happened to me with Sarah Moss's new novel Ghostwall, which was published last year and got a lot of traction and a lot of praise on BookTube, and I just thought it was a bad book. We follow main character Sylvie as a teenage girl who lives with her parents. Father is quite the abusive, alcoholic kind of type, and he's very into ancient Britain. So the family of three embarks on a field trip that is organized by a professor and a group of students trying to relive the life of the Stone Age Britain. So there is no electricity, they have to hunt for their food and gather the berries, and I thought that premise was interesting, and the first half of the book was really, really good. I enjoyed the writing. I enjoyed Sylvie as a main character. She was very feisty and also witty. The nature descriptions were really good, and then it all sort of imploded in the second half when you had this theme that is a sort of a variation on the Lord of the Flies theme, when people are in this solitary environment enacting ancient rites, and then it all goes horribly, horribly wrong. I thought that the plot didn't make sense at all from the characters' perspective, why certain characters all of a sudden acted the way they did. The male characters were beyond cliched, in my opinion, and the ending was right. So unfortunately, Ghostwall was the biggest disappointment, and I know I'm in the minority here. I know that Sean over at Sean the Book Maniac also didn't like the book, so at least I have a comrade in the minority. But for me, it was just a huge, huge disappointment. And then I want to briefly touch on a couple of prompts in the mid-year freakout tag that I really liked, even though they are not, tops and flops. But anyway, like I said, just go with it. And one is a new author, new favorite author, so a debut or new to you author. And I twisted this a little bit because I'm not into the new favorite. This is the new favorite author, but an author that I discovered newly, and it was a debut author that I thought was really amazing. And that's another Australian author. I read a lot of Australian fiction, mainly thanks to Jacqueline from 6 Minutes for Me, and that is Emily Bitto, The Strays, which was published 4 years ago, 2014, and won the Stella Prize, the Australian Book Prize for female writers, fiction and non-fiction, and I loved it. It's a sweeping family story about a young girl befriending a girl at school, and the friend's family is quite bohemian. The father is an artist, and then our protagonist starts to live with this family, and I thought it was brilliant, and I love the writing, and I love book about art, as you know. So an author that I discovered, that I was really happy to discover, is Emily Bitto. Two more prompts to go. Let's see whether we can keep it under 20 minutes. The next one is a new release that you haven't read yet but want to. And for this one, that was quite easy. It's Madhura Vijay, Far Field, because I featured this book in my first TBR of the year to be released in January, and I still haven't read it, and everybody loves it. Vijay is an Indian author, and the book is following a young woman who, after her mother's death, tries to explore her mother's past, finding a man that obviously played a big role in her mother's past, traveling to Kashmir. Yeah, so I really, really want to read this book, and I haven't yet. And the last prompt is a book, or the last prompt that I will answer is a book, a new release in the second half that you're really looking forward to. And there are quite a lot of new releases that I'm looking forward to. But I picked an Irish author, Edna O'Brien, and her new book, Girl, which will come out in October. If you have been following my reviews either on Goodreads or here on BookTube, you know that I was really blown away by Edna O'Brien's book, Little Red Chairs, which deals with the aftermath of the Yugoslavian war. We meet women who have been horribly mistreated, raped, tortured. Not an easy book, but it's really well done. It was fantastic. And the new one, Girl, again, takes on one of these really big but difficult issues because it's about the abduction of young girls by Boko Haram. That's basically all I know and all I want to know, but given the fact how well Edna O'Brien did with Little Red Chairs, I'm really looking forward to this book in October. So this was my mid-year tops and flops combined with the mid-year freakout tag. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. As always, I'm looking forward to talking to you down in the comments. I mean, not talking down on you, but talking to you in the comment section. And I'll see you all soon in the next one. Bye-bye.